Welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to discuss why resource allocation graphs are used, how to draw it, and some example of resource allocation graph. Why we plot a frequency response, maybe of a transistor, op-amp. You might have done some experiments. You might have drawn a frequency response of a transistor, FET, operational amplifier. Why do we do it? Even you might have observed cricket results. Why they plot the graph? They could have written first over 3 run, 1 wicket, second over 2 run, something like that they could have written. It's very difficult to understand. As all of us know, the image or the picture tells 1,000 words. See, this will give the complete information of 100 overs. For example, first over how many runs, second over how many runs. For India, for Australia, you can see it. When the wicket has particular over, you can say. So picture tells 1,000 words. So we prefer diagrams, plots, so that within a short time we can understand more. Deadlocks can be described more precisely in terms of directed graphs. We call that as a resource allocation graph. This graph consists of a set of vertices, V, a set of edges, we call it as a E. What is this V? V is partitioned into two types. One is a process set and there is a resource. P1, P2, Pn are processes. R1, R2, Rm are the resources. Request edge is a basically directed edge. It is from P to R. For example, process Pi to Rj. Assignment edge, it is from resource to the process. For example, Rj to the process Pi. Pictorially, we represent each process as a circle and each resource type Rj as a rectangle. And I may have many resource instances. Those are represented by a dot within the rectangle. Observe it, try to understand. It's a process, how we represent. Resource type, this is the way how we represent. A number of instances are written inside. Pi, request an instance of Rj. Pi, request an instance of Rj. Similarly now, Pi is holding an instance of Rj. How we represent? Now, Pi is holding, Rj is held by Pi, you can say. Pause the video and try to understand this. Let us take one example. We have a set P, process, we have P1, we have P2, we have P3. Set, we have R1, R2, R3 resources. R1, we have R2, R3, we have R4, we have edges, P1 to R1 and P2 to R2, we have R3 and next R1 to P2, you can see R1 to P2 like that. All these edges, you pause the video and go through all these edges and observe that in the resource allocation graph. Now resource instances in this diagram. Resource, we have a R1, instances are 1 and 2 instances of resource type R2 we have, 1 instance of resource type R3 we have and 3 instances of resource type R4 we are having. Now let us consider thus processes. The P1 is holding R2 and requesting for R1 And for example, if you consider the P2 is holding R1, it is holding R2, it is requesting for R3. This is the way how you are supposed to read it. Pause the video and try to understand this. P1 holding R2 and resource type R1 it is requesting. Similarly, you can say P3 is holding R3. Now, try to understand this. In the resource allocation graph, if there is no cycle, then there is no deadlock. If there is a cycle, I can say deadlock may exist. If resource type has exactly one instance, means I don't have more than one, then if cycle is there, I can say it is 100% deadlock. Sir, I have more than one instance, but cycle is there. There is no guarantee of deadlock. Deadlock may occur or maybe it is in the deadlock state. But for that we have to test how, we'll see it later in detail. Pause the video, go through this. See this particular resource allocation graph now. P3 is requesting R2. It is the previous resource allocation graph but one extra edge. P3 requests an instance of a resource type R2. Now we have a cycle here. P1 to R1, R1 to P2, P2 to R3. Observe here. See. P1 to R1, R1 to P2, P2 to R3, P3, R2 back to P1. This is one cycle. Observe carefully. P3 to R2. And now, let us take next. We have another circle. We can say one more cycle is starting from P2, R3, P3, R2, back to P2. So this resource allocation graph is having two cycles. Now let us see in this whether I have a cycle or not. In this I have a cycle P1 to R1, P3, R2 back to P1. But there is no deadlock here. Why? Use your common sense. Why we say no deadlock? P4 may release its instance of resource type R2. Cycle is there, but instances are not one. For example, P4 is holding R2. It may complete the work. It may return the R2 back that time. R2 can be given to the P3 so that this cycle can be avoided. This observation is very, very important. Remember, if graph contains no cycles, I can say no deadlock. If contains cycle, if only one instance is there, 100% deadlock. Several instances are there, there is a possibility of deadlock. This is one important point which you have to remember. Summary, what all we have discussed. There are 4 conditions for a deadlock. Emergency, resource allocation graph, why we use cycle is there. And if only one instance, if many instances, if no cycle, this what all we have discussed. No cycle, no deadlock. Cycle, single instance, deadlock. Many instances, there is a chance of deadlock. Reference book. And thanks for watching this video. If you like, subscribe my channel. Kindly share this with your friends. Thank you.